was a student at my school, and his name was Dylan, and he really enjoyed camping. This was around the time when he went camping with his friend, who he had met since grade one. Dylan and his friend were really, really good friends, and they never really had any problems. However, though, after this story, this is when things started to get really bad. Now, basically what happened is Dylan and his friend decided to go camping with the family. Now, both families were together at the time, so there was a lot of tents in the area. They, of course, found a camping spot which was away from everybody else, but they like to be near people, but not too close when it comes to camping, as they really like to have their own space. Dylan and his friend were pretty much just as goofing around, and they were pretty much just doing what normal teenagers around their age like to do. It was around maybe 4:30 in the afternoon, and that's when they had dinner, which was hot dogs, which was a really good dinner. Now the night went very well, and of course it was sometime around 11 at night where Dylan, along with his friend, decided they would go explore or around the campsite, but of course their parents told them not to wander off too far and to be back before midnight. That was the rules that the parents had gave them, and they decided to go ahead and looks everywhere in the campsite. As they're looking around all over the campsite, they eventually came across what seemed to be some deadfall. They obviously had a feeling that there were just dead branches from trees and decided just to shrug it off and continue. However, Dylan's friend, all of a sudden, was stiff as a statue. At first, Dylan was kind of confused, but his friends pointed at something in the distance, and it appeared to have glowing yellow eyes. Now, at first they thought that it could have been a bear, but it looked too big to be a bear, and since it was dark out, they couldn't see any features of what the creature was. They stood there petrified, unsure what to do. They stared at that thing for at least a few moments when Dylan's father comes out with a gun and shoots at the creature just to scare it off. It eventually runs back into the trees and it disappears years into the night. Dylan and his friend were obviously confused as to what that creature was, but they were just glad that his dad came in. The next morning they looked to find that there were footprints all over the campsite. They looked around thinking that maybe it could have been a bear, but the footprints didn't look like any animal they've ever seen. They don't know if it was a person. They don't know if it was Bigfoot. My friend Caitlin went camping about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, before the global pandemic. This was around 2016, and Caitlin was maybe around 18. She was going camping with her boyfriend, as it was going to be their first time camping together. Now, they have done other events with friends and family, but they decided to go ahead and try camping by themselves, as the parents thought that they were old enough to make their own decisions. However, Caitlin and her boyfriend found a really good camping spot, and of course they end up going to the camping spot and set up camp. It was a half-decent area. There wasn't really too many people in the area, so they didn't have to worry about sharing stuff. As they were just enjoying themselves on the campsite, they got ready and ended up deciding to go do a little bit of hunting. They even did a little bit of fishing, to which they caught some fish, and they planned to eat the fish for dinner. Now, as the night went on, they end up deciding to look around to think that maybe they could see something. They looked in the forest and they playfully joked to each other, saying that there was an animal or possibly a ghost, only just to tease each other, as Caitlin and her boyfriend liked to tease each other. However, it was maybe a few minutes later when all of a sudden Caitlin ends up seeing a bright light in the distance. It looked about maybe another campfire, And at first she thought that it could have been maybe another camper, but it didn't look like another camper at all. And it looked really like something else out of a horror movie. Caitlin looked at her boyfriend and said that she was going to go check it out. She goes there to check out, and as she's getting closer, she realizes that there was some cult gathering around a fireplace where they were chanting something in a different language that she didn't recognize. Obviously, Caitlin was in a far safe distance where no one could find her, and she obviously had no idea as to what these people were doing. She watched as they were chanting something, and she obviously couldn't understand a single word they were saying. She slowly backed up away, getting away from the campsite, where she ends up running back, going back to her campsite. When she got back there, she told her boyfriend that they needed to get out of there, and they did. As they got out of there, they alerted the park ranger about the campsite or the cult they saw, and they went to go check out the area, only that they didn't get any updates regarding that, as there was nothing they could really do. Now, Caitlin, along with her boyfriend, don't do camping too much anymore because of this experience. They have moved on past it, but they still get frightened to this day every time someone mentions this story. They aren't sure as to who these people were, but these people seemed to be very, very horrifying as they were chanting. They obviously had no idea what would have happened to Caitlin if she stayed there any longer. God only knows something bad could have potentially happened to her. About a few years ago, one of the students at my school apparently had this happening to them. Now, at the time, her name was Victoria, and this was around sometime in the summer of 2017. Now, Victoria was gone with her cousins and her aunt and uncle camping, as both the parents were going to be on vacation for at least a week. Now, nothing like anything had happened, except that the aunt and uncle decided to take Victoria as well as her cousins camping. So camping was actually something Victoria has always wanted to go camping, but due to her parents being financially unstable at the time when she was younger, she could never have gone camping, let alone go day-to-day camps. This was something she got to experience, and this was something she always loved and always wanted to do. Things have been quiet, and she really enjoyed going to be by herself camping, but of course she was with her friends, which is her family. Now, fast forward to maybe about a few weeks later, not few weeks later, but fast forward to a few hours later, she ends up looking to see that they were at a really nice camp spot. The camp spot they were at was really nice, and they really enjoyed a nice camping spot, as they never really had anyone around the campsite, so it was a perfect opportunity. Victoria and her aunt and uncle, as well as her cousins, ended up getting the campsite ready, and they were just doing their own thing. However, though, it was around nighttime when the campfire was going on, and Victoria said she was going to go to bed as she didn't feel well. Her aunt and uncle said that she could go there and to bed if she wanted, and that they would see her the next day. She goes to the tent to sleep when she realized that there was someone else in the tent. But as she was about to go in her tent, she realized that there was someone inside her cousin's tent, which happened to be maybe a few feet away from her tent. She ends up telling her aunt and uncle about it, and that's when her uncle gets the gun and goes in the tent and starts scaring off whoever was in there. It turned out to be a homeless person who had been living in the woods for years. They eventually got this man to get out of the tent, but he ran into the woods never to be seen again. It was really confusing as to why this homeless guy would target the tent, but It was definitely a really crazy experience Victoria's ever had. Still to this day, she even wonders, why was this man going in the tents? Was he looking to rob them or something? That really shook her to this day. This happened to actually a friend of mine at the time, and his name was Harrison, and he and his girlfriend loved doing the outdoors, and they had been camping many times before. However, this was one night of camping that they would never forget. Harrison and his girlfriend had just has has moved into their nice neighborhood, and it was about maybe 2 months into their new place where they decided to go camping. They found a half decent campsite that was about maybe a couple minute an hour drive, not very far. So they decided to sit there and go to the campsite where they would enjoy themselves. They found a really good camping spot and they really were enjoying themselves a lot. However, while they were camping, it was until the first night when something strange started to happen. Now, Harrison's girlfriend started seeing things and started hearing things in the woods, and at first she thought they were just nature sounds, but they didn't sound like nature at all. Of course, she told Harrison about them, and Harrison said that she was probably just imagining things and just to ignore it. However, something was inside of Harrison's girlfriend that tells her that something really bad is creeping into the woods, or creeping in the woods ahead of him. She told Harrison that she had a bad feeling something bad's going to happen, and Harrison obviously just told her that she was probably just being paranoid. However, the first night while Harrison was asleep, his girlfriend ended up waking up to hearing someone walking around their tent. Of course, she got a little concerned and was afraid to turn on any light, but she could feel the vibration of someone walking and had a feeling someone was there. She did her best to remain quiet and kept as still as she could as to not alert the person outside of the tent. However, she wasn't sure if it was a creature or there was definitely someone there, but whatever it was walked out of the area of the tent. She managed to unzip just a crack just to get a good look, and appears to be someone wearing a hoodie. Now, the next morning she tells Harrison about this, and Harrison starts getting a little uneasy too, knowing that someone may be stalking their camp. Of course, they try not to think about it and they just continue on. However, it wasn't until the second night when shit started to go crazy. Harrison was pretty much outside of his tent having a cigarette when he looks to the trees and he heard what seemed to be shouting. At first, he was confused as to why there was shouting, thinking that there could have been maybe other campers or some people arguing. However, he ends up looking and seeing that there was this guy in a hoodie who happened to be arguing with his friends, followed by a few gunshots. Harrison could see that this man in the hoodie had killed his buddy, and that's when he prayed to God and hoped that he didn't see him. This man runs off into the woods, and that's when Harrison goes back to the tent and screams that they had to get out of there. He and his girlfriend packed up their stuff, and they got out of the campsite and alerted the park ranger. However, as the park ranger investigated the scene, as well as the police and that, they haven't found the man in the hoodie that had been around. Apparently, there have been other reports on that campsite that there were other people that had experienced the guy in the hoodie going around campsites. But there was no update as to if he was ever caught or not. I like to think that he was caught and put in jail, but that's just because I don't want to think about the alternative of what he's doing right now. Harrison and his girlfriend still go camp into that campsite, but they never saw that man again, and they pray to God and hope they don't ever see him again.